Alright guys, moving on. Previous video we did the B side of the hood, we did the valence, everything's assembled back here. But as you can see, I need to refinish this steel. This steel sat in my garage here for about 6 months, I would say, unfinished. My fault, just didn't get around to it, had a bunch of other projects. On the other side that I epoxied just the other day, there was some bird stuff that caused some corrosion and so on, so I cleaned all that up. This shouldn't be too bad. I don't see anything that's significant here. So we'll just get the DA and go to town. Maybe I'll use my SCT with the metal finishing wheel. I'll see what would work best. Okay. Alright guys, so I'm doing a little bit of experimentation. I've got my electric DA with cheap 80 grit. I've got my SCT Contour, which I really like for stripping paint. And I'm using different wheels for just to test out what would be fastest and really just for funyuns to see what would work. So this is a 120 grit-ish wheel. That's about 180 grit wheel. And these are really mainly for metal finishing. So I wanted to see if I could remove this type of rust, surface rust, using these wheels. Here's another one. It's kind of a flap with you know, like it's got 120 grit sandpaper in here. So this is more aggressive, and this works better with the SCT to remove this sort of surface finish. However, the DA, I think, leaves a more desirable finish that would be kind of pre-epoxy, and the DA removes some of these linear scratches that I put in when I was stripping this with the heavy wheel on the SCT Contour. So I think what I've decided, you know, these wheels are great, but they leave a finish that's really too smooth, and it takes a lot of downward pressure to remove the actual rust. So and this is, the hood itself is pretty thin. I don't want to push down too hard. It doesn't impart a lot of heat at all, but I'm going to go back to the DA and just get one uniform finish to avoid any sort of swirls. And in addition, I should be able to get rid of some of the slightly deeper scratches, like I don't know, let's find some, like here that I put in, or here that I put in when I was removing the bad paint and the rest of the rust. So the DA it is for now. I'm about halfway done. I just wiped it with some mineral spirits, so I've got half and half here so you guys can see, like that. I switched to 40 grit on my DA. It's doing a much better job than the 80. It just saves some time, and I'm also able to get some some scratches like that out, or at least see that kind of a deeper groove like that. Able to blend over that a little bit better. So slow going. It's a big hood. I'm gonna do this side. I'll see if I can find my tripod and set you guys up so you can see some time-lapse progress on this side. We'll just keep grinding. Pardon the pun. Alright guys, well, about 10 80 grit and 40 grit discs later, and I think I'm finally done. Lesson to be learned here is use good quality paper. The stuff that I have is just from Harbor Freight, and it's okay, but it gets really dull pretty quickly. And I'm not, I can't push very hard on this because it tends to oil can. So there's that. But I'd say solid 2 hours, 2.5 hours of sanding, switching between 40 grit and 80 grit. 80 grit actually seemed to do better than 40. I think that's mainly because the 80 grit I had was somehow sharper than the 40. Anyway, that's done. Now we're gonna prep the area here, clean everything up a little bit, get rid of the dust on the floor, and prep some epoxy, and finally epoxy the top of the hood. Let's just take a look under the light here how this looks. It's not too bad. So that's an 80 grit scratch pretty much everywhere. I think I got clean metal pretty much 100% of the way. It's hard to tell sometimes because there seems like there's every once in a while like those dots, like a stain, and maybe that's a little bit of rust in between the scratches. It's hard to know when to stop, like, is that rust? So I'm not sure. But I really don't want to use OSFO or something like that on here. I know a lot of people are successful using a rust conversion on raw steel like this and then neutralizing it. As Josie Wales said, man's got to know his limitations. I've never done that. I don't want to experiment on my hood, and so I'm just going to try to get as much of the rust off as I can and hope that the epoxy is enough to seal it up as much as possible. Of what I've seen, this is pretty much as good as it should be for metalwork pre-epoxy. I've seen a lot of forums and talked to some folks, and this seems to be all right. So I think we'll go with it. We'll roll into the next day and start the epoxy. All right, gang, it's a couple of days later. We're ready to get some epoxy on this hood and be done with it and get it out of the way. As you can tell, it takes up most of this, well, a lot of the garage. So anyway, I've been sanding. I just scuffed it up again, and grease and wax and grease removed it. I'm gonna get a tack cloth and just clean it up. The epoxy has been inducing. We're only a couple minutes away, but I just wanted to show you the surface finish here. We have a combination of 40 and 80 grit scratches in here. Some of the linear ones are just on a block with some 60 that I came back afterwards. I'm not sure why, but the swirl marks and so on are from the DA. And we'll see what gets covered with the epoxy. The Nason is very thin, which I think is good. It gets into the cracks everywhere. And I'm gonna try to put on, I don't know, at least 2 good coats, maybe a few more, because I really want this to be a very, very hard surface. I do have some metal finishing to do, as you can tell. There are a couple of dents and dings. You can kind of see them in the light here, in particular on this side, certainly where the hood hinge was. A couple of bumps here that I wasn't able to get to, but that's going to be on top of the, I'm going to do that on top of the epoxy. So here we go.
This is the first coat. This is the first coat I'm going to wait on the flash off. This is more for practice for me, but I need to do a better job of managing the hose, putting it over my shoulder because you can see, I don't know if you can see, but there's some stripes. Just got to do a better job of that. And I think for this next coat, I'm just going to go this way all the way because I can reach about the halfway point and come over here and finish it off. So, wait a few minutes, let it all flash off, and do it again. I'm going to check the underneath now real quick, make sure it's all right. It's okay. Get a quick once over on the back side too.
And just to show you guys the scratch coverage on the first coat, it's pretty good. Some of the deeper ones, like right over here, and some of the deeper gouges are in there. But generally the 40 and 80 grit there's some lines going left and right there. But generally it's pretty good. So this is just the first coat. Well, here's one big one. That's when I was using the wheel to take the paint off. But generally it's pretty decent coverage. So I'll bring it back when it's all done and we'll do a final check.
I know, nothing more exciting than watching paint dry, but I wanted to show you. So I went a little bit heavier on the second coat. Let's just say it was purposeful, and it's interesting. I'm learning about this, right? So I probably didn't wait long enough for the first coat to fully flash off, because you can see the orange peel is pretty heavy in some areas, and then over here a little bit lighter. You know, like there's some pockets where the orange peel is not so heavy, and I wonder if those are the areas where I went a little bit easier. And I do wonder if I have to keep the fan on, otherwise I get spray everywhere. So we'll wait. I've got about a third of the cup left, maybe a little bit less. I'm going to do a little band right here just to get a little extra, and then we'll be done. All right, well, let's wrap this up. So orange peel, it's there. It doesn't matter because this is epoxy, but I just wanted to learn about it a little bit more. But generally all the scratches are filled, and I'll be able to get some body work done. I can tell I've got kind of tell in the light here. There's a little wowie right there. Obviously that spot. Some stuff over here. Scratch. There's a couple little down dings in there. A little bit of a, not sure what that is. Couple of scratch marks in here, a little bit deeper in the metal from when I was stripping the paint. I wish I had good paint stripper, but I was really nervous about using chemicals and then having some negative reaction with the epoxy. So I think this will be fine. What's left? So next project is this. Inner fenders, rad support. That's going to be the next project. Then the project after that will be firewall and cowl, which I'm not looking forward to. And then we'll decide whether or not we're going to do anything with the inside. I know I need to do the inside of the tailgate. But since I decided I am going to do a color change, I feel like I need to change the color of the exposed metal that's inside the vehicle around the A-pillars and back on the around the rear windows. So we'll see, might get a little bit interesting in there. Anyway, thanks for watching and watching paint dry with me.